Well, hi, this is Billy Crone of Get a Life Ministries, and I want to thank you for joining us for our next documentary in a series of documentaries entitled Klaus Schwab, the World Economic Forum, and the Coming Mark of the Beast. And if you've been tracking with our other documentaries we've been producing, you'll know that this is the fourth in line of our last three. The Great COVID Deception, number one. Number two, Beyond COVID, the Global Elite's Plan for Human 2.0. And number three, Klaus Schwab, the Third Reich, and the COVID-19 Holocaust. And in that last documentary, we exposed the historical roots of Klaus Schwab and his family and their obvious ties with Hitler and the Nazis, as well as Klaus Schwab pushing for what he calls the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which is really a rehashed, relabeled, and repackaged version of Hitler's Third Reich. The agendas, the behavior, they're completely the same, and all Klaus and his evil gang of global elites have done is just simply change the name. And this is why our future is radically changing right before our very eyes, in a not so good fashion. In fact, it's being changed rapidly in a horrible, rotten fashion. The reality is this: if Klaus and his buddies get their way with their revamped Hitlerian agenda, soon this will be our experience when applying for a loan.
Hey, I'm Brian. My pronouns are he, his, him. I understand you're looking for a small business loan, but you're having troubles with your ESG score.
I was denied.
What's your business?
I operate drilling equipment, oil and gas.
Uh-huh. The E in ESG is for environmental. You're in a dirty industry.
So I can't get no loan?
Well, let's take a look at your company's social policies. Tell me about your plan to create social justice.
Social justice.
Do your employees get paid time off for abortions? And tell me about your diversity, equity, and inclusion plan.
Well, I ain't got none of that. I'm a driller. I just hire good people to do the work.
Well, maybe there's one more thing we can check. Do you have any female co-owners?
No, just me.
Ooh, have you ever identified as a woman? Or even just non-binary? It could really help your score.
What?
Your loan is denied.
And all kidding aside, that's exactly where Klaus Schwab and his Hitlerian gang of evil global elites are taking us, whether we want it or not, and it's even worse than that. It won't just be morality issues that determine whether or not we can get a loan, but even our attitude towards the government. And that also includes if you say anything negative against this so-called regime on social media or any other public platform anywhere, including who you hang out with and how well you obey their orders, just to name a few of their admitted criteria. This is simply a massive micromanaging of the planet that Klaus Schwab and his evil gang of global elites are bringing to us, again, whether we want it or not. And they call it the Fourth Industrial Revolution and or the Great Reset. But as we saw in our last documentary, Klaus Schwab, the Third Reich, and the COVID-19 Holocaust, it's just simply what the Bible calls the Antichrist kingdom. Let's revisit that passage again. Revelation 13, 2 through 3, 4 through 6, 7 through 8, 9, 11, and 18 says, "And I saw a beast coming out of the sea. He had 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 crowns on his horns, and on each head a blasphemous name. The dragon gave the beast his power and his throne and great authority. The whole world was astonished and followed the beast. Men worshiped the dragon because he had given authority to the beast, and they also worshiped the beast and asked, 'Who is like the beast? Who can make war against him?' The beast was given a mouth to utter proud words and blasphemies and to exercise authority for 42 months. He opened his mouth to blaspheme God and to slander his name and his dwelling place and those who live in heaven. And he was given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. All inhabitants of the earth will worship the beast, all whose names have not been written in the book of life belonging to the Lamb that was slain from the creation of the world. He who has an ear, let him hear. Then I saw another beast coming out of the earth. He had 2 horns like a lamb, but he spoke like a dragon. He exercised all authority of the first beast on his behalf, and he made the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose fatal wound had been healed. And he performed great and miraculous signs, even causing fire to come down from heaven to earth in full view of men. And because of these signs, he was given power to do on behalf of the first beast. He deceived the inhabitants of the earth. And he ordered them to set up an image in honor of the beast, who was wounded by the sword and yet lived. And he was given power to give breath to the image of the first beast, so that it could speak and cause all who refused to worship the image to be killed. And he also forced everyone, small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on his right hand or on his forehead, so that no one could buy or sell unless he had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of his name. This calls for wisdom. If anyone has insight, let him calculate the number of the beast, for it is man's number. His number is 666. So the Bible warned and predicted nearly 2,000 years ago that an unthinkable evil empire would emerge upon the whole planet. And it's unthinkable and evil because, first, it's satanic. The beast or the Antichrist is empowered by the dragon that is defined in the Bible as none other than Satan himself. Then this beast or Antichrist would work together with a false prophet or global religious figure who would then help deceive the whole planet into merging everyone on earth under their authority. Then they would institute a one world government. The phrase there, he was given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. A one world religion. The phrase there, he exercised all authority of the first beast on his behalf and made the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast. And a one world economy mixed in with some sort of electronic mark of the beast type system. And that's the phrase there. He also forced everyone, small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on his right hand or on his forehead. And that will control all the buying and selling on the whole planet. Again, with the phrase, so that no one could buy or sell unless he had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of his name. So it also implies, though, a huge global Big Brother system that knows everything about anyone. You know, just like the ESG video you just saw, including whether or not people are obeying and if they don't know exactly where they are so they can be killed. Okay, and that's what the phrase there. He ordered them to set up an image in honor of the beast and was given power to give breath to the image of the first beast so that it could speak and cause all who refuse to worship the image to be killed. So as you can see, as we exposed in our last documentary, Klaus Schwab and his so-called Great Reset agenda, pushed by the World Economic Forum, along with the help of all these global elites, are simply laying the foundation for what the Bible prophesied would come in the last days. And this is the Antichrist kingdom. And all these guys, they're all in on it, folks. All countries, virtually all politicians, both sides of the fence, by the way, from all over the world, are all a part of the satanic agenda, as this man shares.
In every Western country today, there are three clearly identifiable megatrends shaping the policies of mainstream political parties across the board. Whether you look at Germany or France or Britain, the US, Canada, Australia, whether you look at the left or the right, all mainstream parties support, firstly, ongoing immigration into our countries. They all ridicule the defense of borders and the idea of building walls or fences, while maintaining that strict border controls and immigration laws are somehow unfeasible. Secondly, they support the gradual build-up of global governance structures, such as the United Nations, the European Union, and transnational legislation in the name of human rights. Thirdly, they all support far-reaching global policies to combat supposed climate change. Immigration, supranational legislation, and climate policies. Those are the three grand projects that define the political undercurrent of Western mainstream parties, of both the left and the right. And all represent a transition from one type of society to supposedly another type of society. They stem from a vision of a new world. A world in which we would no longer be divided into different nations, different peoples, a world without parliaments that may decide things for just one country alone, and in doing so may greatly diverge from the parliaments of other countries. Indeed, it's a vision of a world in which we will supposedly all be growing towards one humanity, governed by common rules that are to be centrally administered on a global level. This would be a world in which a global superstate increasingly controls every tiny aspect of our lives, because everything we do supposedly affects the climate. As senior aide to Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said, and I quote, "We don't view the Green New Deal as a climate thing. We view it as a change the entire economy thing." End of quote. But that is exactly right. We are in the midst of a structural remaking of the world as we know it. Our nations, our cultural, political, and spiritual homes are being dismantled. Slowly but surely, our societies are becoming so diverse that a shared common identity will no longer be feasible. We're losing our democracies because parliaments get to decide less and less, as well as our freedom, because all of our lives are increasingly being regulated by the change the entire economy project that masquerades as saving the planet. It's crucial to understand that the fundamental idea behind these major trends is, in fact, Marxist. These three grand projects embody in their entirety an orchestrated transition towards a supposedly higher, utopian, peaceful, and egalitarian stage of existence, the long-promised post-capitalist era. The result, alas, will be dystopian. This is because we are beings in need of a sense of community, a sense of home. Mass migration, global governance, and the new climate control measures take these things away. They alienate us from our actual lives. They make us nowhere creatures, inhabiting a land with which we will have lost all connection, living with people to whom we feel no relationship, and administered by bureaucrats over whom we have no control. We all experience this every day. The New World Order is upon us. Europe has already gone a lot further down this path, of course, than America, but it is happening in the United States as well. It's a phenomenon we can witness across the Western world, and it is the greatest danger of our life.
And it's what the Bible calls the rise of the Antichrist kingdom. And like that gentleman, some of us are catching on and exposing this. This so-called utopia that these global evil megamaniacs is simply to become the coming Antichrist nightmare that the Bible warned about. And the same evil, wicked global elites who are working with Klaus Schwab to pull all this off also control the media, the various media platforms that we use to share information, and they admittedly filter or block or ban others from warning people about their New World Order ruse, the so-called Great Reset. The Fourth Industrial Revolution, whatever you want to call it, folks, it's all the same. And they're vilifying anyone who doesn't go along with their satanic ruse, making us whistleblowers out to be the bad guys, the crazy ones. And then they further brainwash people into thinking that they shouldn't even listen to us because we're just a bunch of wacky conspiracy people, as this man shares.
Here's what I make of the bigger picture and what some of us so-called COVIDiots, anti-vaxxers, Putin apologists, fascist, far-right extremist, swivel-eyed loons want to talk about next. Whatever is happening in Ukraine to that country and to its people, both are undoubtedly being used by those who also need something and someone to make their own populations look the other way. The horror show in the Ukraine is being exploited. Here at home last week, Boris implied that while only lesser mortals are fretting selfishly about heat and food, his attentions are focused on the lofty heights of saving the world. The little people of Britain must endure cold and hunger for, guess what? The greater good. Anyone with even the faintest grasp on, at least an interest in geopolitics, knows it's utterly bogus, and he is a fraud, along with Biden, Trudeau, Macron, von der Leyen, and the rest of a list so long I don't have time to read it out. The imminent cold and hunger were made inevitable not by Putin in 2022, but years ago by the adoption of ruinous, ideologically driven nonsense presented as world-saving environmental policies that only denied us any hope of energy independence, the profitable exploitation of all the resources beneath our feet and seas, and condemned much of Europe to dependence on Russia. What we are paying is the cost of going green when those policies are not green at all, but predicated upon some of the most destructive and toxic practices and technologies ever conceived. Wind and solar will never provide the energy we need to keep thriving as societies, to grow and flourish. The situation is so insane, I find it easiest to conclude we are simply meant to do without. Stop thinking we're all going to have cars and international travel and warm homes, just different than before. What seems obvious is that we're being groomed to live small lives, to make way for the grandiose expectations and entitlements of the elites that are working so effectively to hoover up the last of the wealth. Smaller lives, colder lives, may actually be the best we can hope for, given the plans evidently laid out for us by those with their hands on the levers of power. Our leaders used to tell us we needed them in order to be free. In future, they will have us believe we need them to be safe. Caged animals are safe, but it's not much of a life. Energy prices will keep going up. This will obviously hurt the poorest countries and poorest people first and worst. What is obvious about the green warriors making war on affordable, reliable energy is that they care not a jot about the poor, at least not the actual poor, alive in the world today. Those real flesh and blood people are to be sacrificed by the millions, utterly denied the energy that might have lifted them out of poverty, so that imaginary people, as yet unborn, might thrive in a utopia that exists only in the imaginations of pampered protesters. China will just burn more coal to compensate and seize more control, but shh, best not mention it. That corrupted thinking comes from communism, or perhaps communism's idiot cousin, socialism. Green warriors don't care about the poor, in the same way socialists don't care about the poor. They just hate the rich, which is ironic, given that with their infantile protests they're doing the work of the very richest for them. Ukraine produces a fifth of the wheat crop required by the poorest. Not this year though. Whatever has been grown will be hard to store and harder to export, so that hunger and full-blown famine becomes a looming threat for hundreds of millions of the world's hungriest people. In richer countries, life is being made deliberately impossible for farmers. Spiking costs of fertilisers and fuel are one thing, but governments in the Netherlands, across Europe, in Canada and elsewhere around the world are persecuting those who grow our food. Farmers are being made to endure restrictions that destroy their businesses, being driven off their land altogether. They'll have to watch as fields they have known and cared for over generations are hoovered up by transnational organisations with other ideas about what that land might be used for. If you think mass migration and immigration are difficult problems now, wait until the unavoidable famines cause a hemorrhage of humanity out of the poorest countries of Africa and the Middle East. Perhaps hundreds of millions of people with nothing more to lose. Where do you think they'll go? And here's another inconvenient truth. Money and weapons keep flowing into Ukraine, but despite months of war and sanctions, the Russian ruble remains strong and an end to hostilities seems as far away as ever. Maybe no one wants that war to end. Wars don't determine who's right anyway. Wars determine who's left. Ultimately, this is all about wealth and power. Not money, remember. Money is to wealth as a menu is to a steak. One's a worthless bit of paper, the other something that will keep you alive. This is about actual wealth and its acquisition. It's about the already super rich getting hold of even more of the real things. Land, buildings, natural resources, gold. While we are supposed to be frightened out of our wits, squabbling among ourselves and just hoping that one day it will all be over, a relative handful of others are hoovering up all the wealth as planned. Whichever way you slice it, an economic and societal shock on a scale that has not happened in lifetimes, if ever, is on its way. The world we live in is built in its entirety upon unimaginable and now unsustainable levels of debt. Trillions, quadrillions of dollars worth. There's always much more debt in the world than money, so that it's never possible to settle the debt. Now that debt, all that created money, is about to come crashing down. Don't be fooled by Sunak and the rest and their about-face, their pretense that they were with us all along. COVID and lockdown carried them only so far, but they plan to go much further. Disease, war, famine, death. The same people always ride on the same four horses. Now is not the time to take our eyes off the ball, not by a long chalk. Keep watching the usual suspects. As I say, you ain't seen nothing yet.
Wow. Hey, we need news like that over here in America, okay? But what he mentioned, what's coming next, you ain't seen nothing yet with these power-hungry, global, evil megamaniacs. It's exactly what the Bible says as well. The scriptures declare that once the Antichrist kingdom begins and the whole planet gets snookered into his evil, twisted agenda, the next thing that's coming after that is war, famine, disease, just like he said, just like these sickos are planning on doing. It's almost like somebody's following the script or something. Go figure, okay? But here's that text. Revelation chapter 6, 1 through 8. I watched as the Lamb opened the first of the 7 seals. And then I heard one of the 4 living creatures say in a voice like thunder, "Come." And I looked, and there before me was a white horse. Its rider held a bow, and he was given a crown. And he rode out as a conqueror bent on conquest. When the Lamb opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature say, "Come." And then another horse came out, a fiery red one. Its rider was given power to take peace from the earth and to make men slay each other. To him was given a large sword. When the Lamb opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, "Come." And I looked, and there before me was a black horse. Its rider was holding a pair of scales in his hand. And then I heard what sounded like a voice among the 4 living creatures saying, "A quart of wheat for a day's wages, and 3 quarts of barley for a day's wages, and do not damage the oil and wine." Well, when the Lamb opened the 4th seal, I heard the voice of the 4th living creature say, "Come." And I looked, and there before me was a pale horse. Its rider was named Death, and Hades was following close behind him. And they were given power over 1/4 of the earth to kill by sword, famine, and plague, and by the wild beasts of the earth. You know, because wild animals are going to be hungry too. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I'm kind of thinking that doesn't sound like a good time to me. Anybody else? Okay. Yeah, and that's what you get when you cut a deal with the actual Antichrist that the Bible warned about nearly 2,000 years ago, which is exactly what these global leaders, including Klaus Schwab, are doing right now before our very eyes. They're laying the groundwork for it all. The Bible says their so-called utopia, it quickly descends into an Antichrist nightmare very quickly. You immediately go into a global war, a global famine, global death, 1/4 of the population of the planet dying. That's nearly 2 billion people, which is precisely what these sick, twisted people want. It's murderous and it's satanic. But my question is, well, how in the world did we get here? Especially in such a short amount of time. I mean, what is this World Economic Forum that seems to be a part of this? And what does this have to do with Klaus Schwab and the global elites around the world working with him to create this wicked, evil, satanic agenda? And what is this great reset utopia vision that they keep talking about? Is it really a wonderful man-made utopia, or is it simply, as we saw in our last documentary, a rehash, repackaged, relabeled Hitlerian nightmare preparing the way for the actual Antichrist himself, which will make Hitler look like chump change? Well, that was a mouthful, so let's begin with that first question there concerning Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum. In our last documentary, Klaus Schwab, the Third Reich, and the COVID-19 Holocaust, we left off in our historical journey up until the time when Klaus got married to his wife Hilda and revealed that both of their children are now grown up and are a vital part of Klaus's cadre of global megamaniacs, helping to institute this new and improved Hitlerian agenda across the whole planet. But what also helped him to begin that process of global transformation was a global economic think tank that he created, the World Economic Forum. So let's see how that began, as this researcher exposes. Born in Ravensburg, Germany in 1938, Klaus Schwab is a child of Adolf Hitler's Germany, a police state regime built on fear and violence, on brainwashing control, on propaganda and lies, on industrialism, eugenics, on dehumanization and disinfection, on a chilling and grandiose vision of a new order that would last 1,000 years. Schwab seems to have dedicated his life to reinventing that nightmare and to trying to turn it into a reality, not just for Germany, but for the whole world. Worse still, as his words confirm time and time again, his technocratic fascist vision is also a twisted transhumanist one, which will merge humans with machines in a curious mixes of digital and analog life, which will infect our bodies with smart dust, and in which police will apparently be able to read our brains. And as we will see, he and his accomplices are using the COVID-19 crisis to bypass democratic accountability, to override opposition, to accelerate their wicked agenda, and to impose it on the rest of mankind against our will in what he terms the Great Reset. This new fascism is today being advanced in a guise of global governance, biosecurity, the new normal, the New Deal for nature, and the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Schwab, the octogenarian founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum, sits at the center of this matrix like a spider on a giant web. The original fascist project in Italy and Germany was all about the merger of state and business, using the state to protect and advance the interests of the wealthy elite. Schwab was continuing this approach in a post-World War II context when in 1971 he founded the European Management Forum, which held annual meetings at Davos in Switzerland, and here he promoted his ideology of stakeholder capitalism, in which businesses were brought into close cooperation with the government and where businesses or stakeholders would, design everything to meet the needs of all stakeholders and privately shovel money to themselves and executives while maintaining a public front. In other words, businesses and governments control it all without any public voice or approval. And this is why the stakeholder concept is nefarious, because it discards any idea of democracy or rule by the people in favor of rule by corporate interests. Society is no longer regarded as a living community, but as a business whose profitability is the sole aim of all human activity. And so Schwab set out this agenda back in 1971 in his book called Modern Enterprise Management in Mechanical Engineering, where his use of the term stakeholders effectively redefined, human beings not as citizens, free individuals, or members of communities, but as secondary participants in a massive commercial enterprise. We're just a cog in the wheel who exists for them. And the aim of each and every person's life is to, quote, achieve long-term growth and prosperity for this enterprise. In other words, to protect and increase the wealth of the capitalist elite. This all became even clearer in 1987 when Klaus renamed his European Management Forum as the World Economic Forum. The WEF, or the World Economic Forum, describes itself on its own website, quote, as the global platform for public-private cooperation, and describes how it creates, quote, partnerships between businessmen, politicians, intellectuals, and other leaders of society to define, discuss, and advance key issues on global agenda. These partnerships in which the World Economic Forum creates are aimed at replacing democracy with a global leadership of hand-picked, unelected individuals whose duty is not to serve the public, but to impose the rule of the 1% on that public with as little interference as from the rest of us as possible. Everything in the world is to be reduced to economic challenges, economic imperatives, and economic benefits for the ruling capitalist class. And it is this economic imperative that Klaus Schwab enthusiastically shares will provide, quote, a revolution that is fundamentally changing the way we live, work, and relate to one another, and he insists it will be, quote, unlike anything humankind has ever experienced before. Well, duh. And then he gushes over this dystopian fascist nightmare by gleefully saying this, quote, consider the unlimited possibilities of having billions of people, connected by mobile devices, giving rise to unprecedented processing power, storage capabilities, and knowledge access. Or think about the staggering confluence of emerging technology breakthroughs covering wide-ranging fields such as artificial intelligence, or AI, robotics, the Internet of Things, or IoT, autonomous vehicles, 3D printing, nanotechnology, biotechnology, material science, energy storage, and quantum computing, just to name a few. Many of these innovations build on and amplify each other in a fusion of technologies, across the physical, digital, and the biological worlds. Which is why he's repeatedly called for people getting used to the idea of getting microchipped themselves, just like all of our products.
Aujourd'hui, au bout de ça, on parle de puces qu'on pourra s'implanter. Ce sera quand ça?
Certainement dans les 10 années à venir. Et d'abord, on va les implanter dans nos vêtements, c'est-à-dire wearables, comme on le dit. Et après, on pourrait s'imaginer qu'on les implante dans nos cerveaux ou dans notre peau. Et à la fin, peut-être il y a une communication directe entre notre cerveau et le monde digital.
Boy, of all places for him to suggest we humans get microchip, just like all the other products on the planet, it just happens to be in the head. Again, it's almost like somebody's following a script. Because it just so happens that that is exactly where the Bible says people will be taking the mark of the beast under the Antichrist coming global nightmare in the 7-year tribulation. It's either the right hand or the forehead. Revelation 14, 9 through 10. If anyone worships the beast and his image and receives his mark on the forehead or on the hand, he too will drink of the wine of God's fury, which has been poured full strength into the cup of his wrath. In other words, you are doomed if you take that mark, which is why you need to get saved now through Jesus Christ, if you're not, so you can escape this horrible time frame that we see being built right before our very eyes by Klaus and the gang. Jesus Christ is the only way out of this mess. I didn't say it. He did. Listen to him. John 14, 6, Jesus answered, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. But Klaus's words and behavior, it gets even worse, folks. He then goes on to describe this sick satanic vision for the whole planet to be microchipped on a massive scale, creating a type of surveillance state for all the people left behind at the rapture. He goes on, he says, Klaus also looks forward to even more chips or sensors installed in, listen, homes and clothes and accessories, cities, transport, energy works, into smart cities with all their important data platforms. All things will be smart and connected to the internet, Schwab says, and this will extend to animals as, quote, sensors wired into cattle can communicate to each other through a mobile phone network. He also loves the idea of smart cell factories, which could enable the, quote, accelerated generation of vaccines and big data technologies. And he assures us it will deliver new and innovative ways to service citizens, customers, and we will have to stop objecting to businesses profiting from and harnessing and selling information about every aspect of our personal lives. And he insists, establishing trust in the data and algorithms used to make decisions will be vital. But at the end of the day, it's clear, folks, that all this technological excitement revolves purely around profit or value, as Schwab prefers to put it, with his blockchain technology becoming the driving force behind massive flows of products and services, providing secure digital identities that can make new markets accessible to anyone connected to the internet. In general, the technologies of the 4IR, or the Fourth Industrial Revolution, for the ruling business elite rolled out via 5G poses unprecedented threats to our freedom, as Klaus even concedes, quote, the tools of the Fourth Industrial Revolution enable new forms of surveillance and other means of control that run counter to healthy open societies. Again, duh. But he spins it in a positive light by saying this, watch this, public crime is likely to decrease due to the convergence of sensors and cameras and AI and facial recognition software. And then he goes on to describe, while relishing how these new technologies, quote, can intrude into, listen, the private spaces of our minds, listen, reading our thoughts and influencing our behavior. Now, wait a second. Can these chips that Klaus Schwab wants to put in our brains really be used to read our minds? Yes. In fact, he actually admitted that's exactly what those brain chips will allow him to do, as seen here in this next interview. It features Klaus Schwab interviewing Sergey Brin, one of the co-founders of Google, at the World Economic Forum in 2017, the very next year after he mentioned putting brain chips in people's heads, as we saw in the last video. And again, by the way, Sergey Brin, he is one of the co-founders of Google, and the other one being Larry Page, who are also helping to create the AI, or artificial intelligence system, needed to run the back end of Klaus's Antichrist system that will help micromanage the whole planet, as outlined in the dystopian vision we just saw of Klaus Schwab. But watch how Klaus Schwab admits, watch this, that these brain chips will allow him to do to us, because as he puts it, we're all going to get him.
But can you imagine that in 10 years when we are sitting here, we have an implant in our brains, and I can immediately feel, because you all will have implants, and we measure your brain waves, and I can immediately tell you how the people react, or I can feel how the people react to your answers. Is it imaginable?
I think that is imaginable. I think.
I don't know about you, but to me, it's almost like Sergey Brin is there stumbling, pausing, like he's saying, said, dude, I can't believe you just let the cat out of the bag in public. You're not supposed to do that. Are you nuts? People aren't supposed to know all this. They'll freak out. But either way, as you can see, they really have plans for all of us getting these brain chips so they can read our minds. I mean, you talk about a prison planet. No wonder Jesus said to avoid this time frame by getting saved through him now before it's too late. Okay, and if that's you, you need to do it. But this is also what the book of Revelation implies, that the actual Antichrist and the false prophet will be able to do in the 7-year tribulation. We see that in this verse, Revelation 13, 15 through 18. He was given power to give breath to the image of the first beast so that it could speak and cause all who refused to worship the image to be killed. He also forced everyone, small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on his right hand or forehead so that no one could buy or sell unless he had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of his name. This calls for wisdom. And wisdom is right. But think about it. How are the false prophet and the Antichrist going to know who obeys their order to worship the image of the Antichrist all over the planet all at the same time? Simple, folks. If you can get everyone to get these brain chips that Klaus Schwab and the gang and Sergey Brin are talking about, they would instantly, like he said, know anybody's thoughts anywhere on the planet, whether or not they obeyed, all at the same time, in real time, with AI running the whole system. Do you see it? And again, if you haven't seen our massive study on artificial intelligence, I encourage you, please get that as well. It's simply called The AI Invasion, and we expose how these global elites really are invading the whole planet with AI, or artificial intelligence. The new term out there is called algorithm, means the same thing, it's AI. But they're doing it just in time to create this Antichrist system that Klaus Schwab is envisioning and implementing for us. Okay? Now, believe it or not, that's still not all he's working on. Okay? Klaus Schwab also predicts, quote, as capabilities in this area improve, the temptation for law enforcement agencies and courts to use these techniques to determine, listen, the likelihood of criminal activity, assess guilt, or even possibly retrieve memories directly from people's brains will increase. Even crossing a national border might one day involve a detailed brain scan to assess an individual's security risk. No, wait a second here. This is starting to sound like another movie premise. You know, like the one Tom Cruise was in called Minority Report? Okay, you ever saw that? Let's take a look at what was going on in that movie premise for those of you who may not have seen it.
A road diverges in the desert. Lexus. The road you're on, John Anderton, is the one less traveled. Make sure you
Good evening, John.
You can move the old-fashioned
John Anderton. 21 Styles provides gourmet cuisine.
John Anderton! You can use a Guinness right about now.
Stressed out, John Anderton.
escape from it all, Harrison. Get away, John Anderton. Forget your troubles.
He's been identified on the Metro. The train makes 2 stops at 20th and 33rd.
Send units to each location.
Good luck, John.
Any contractions?
Only the ones you give me.
Okay, Jed, what's coming?
Red Ball, double homicide, 1 male, 1 female. Killer's male, white, 40s. Agatha nailed the time frame at 8:04 a.m. The twins are a little fuzzy on that, so we'll need confirmation. Location still uncertain. Remote witnesses are plugged in. This will be case number 1108.
Morning, detectives. Case number 1108, pre-visualized by the precogs, recorded on hollow sphere by pre-crimes Q-stacks. My fellow witnesses for case number 1108 are Dr. Catherine James and Chief Justice Frank Pollard. Good morning.
Good morning.
Will the witness preview and validate number 1108 at this time?
Affirmative, I will validate.
Go get him.
Stand by.
Time of murder, 8:04 a.m. That is 24 minutes, 13 seconds from now. This is a red one.
You know how blind I am without those ones.
See if I can capture that, yes, sir.
Running out of time. You know, I was thinking maybe I'd play hooky, stay home today.
I'm working too much tomorrow.
Can you grab that?
So clear.
Got him in the Foxhole, 4421 Gainsborough.
Send a DCPD blue and white. Set up a perimeter until we're en route. Look at me. Look at me. Positive for Howard Marks. Mr. Marks, by mandate of the District of Columbia Pre-Crime Division, I'm placing you under arrest for the future murder of Sarah Marks and Donald Dubin that was to take place today, April 22nd, at 0800 hours, 4 minutes.
No, I didn't do anything. Sarah!
Give the man his hat.
Oh, God. Don't put that halo on me! Sarah!
Put your hand on your head.
Help me!
Well, let's not kid ourselves. We are arresting individuals who have broken no law.
But they will. The commission of the crime itself is absolute metaphysics. The precogs see the future, and they're never wrong.
Oh yeah, computers are never wrong. Remember that movie? Remember those scenes? They knew wherever you went, wherever you walked, they could identify you and pinpoint your exact location anywhere, anytime, and they could even predict what you would do in the future based off this constant electronic monitoring. Now, as crazy as it sounds, I'm here to tell you folks, now with AI or artificial intelligence or algorithms, that science fiction movie is about to become our everyday reality if Klaus gets his way. This is the system that Klaus Schwab and his evil gang of global elites are building for us, whether we want it or not. And getting people microchipped in the head or the hand, along with everything else on the planet, you know, the so-called smart cities that Klaus is promoting, is how the Minority Report becomes our daily report or reality. And if you don't think this system would ever be put into play, it already has, all around the world in these so-called smart cities. Here's just one easy example.
A Florida teenager has been incessantly harassed by local police after they've decided to start using this predictive policing method in order to essentially accuse people of committing crimes before they've even committed them. It's insane, and it's insane that it's being used already without any real national backlash.
Okay, so this is one of the most outrageous things, and now is spreading like a cancer throughout the country, but this case is amazing. So I wanna read you one thing here. They say, no, this is not pre-crime, okay? This is intelligence-led policing. First of all, that sounds like pre-crime. They say, no, this is for, quote, at-risk youth who are destined to a life of crime. But that's pre-crime. You're saying they're not destined to a life of crime.
And you want to know how invasive their data collection process is? So they look into everything from like school records. For instance, school records were used to allocate students one of 4 labels: on track, at risk, off track, or critical. All right, getting a D grade or having a parent or sibling go to prison could be enough to put a child in the at-risk category, according to Pasco's own 83-page intelligence-led policing manual.
No, guys, just think about that for a second. Did you ever get bad grades in school? They're gonna put you on a list for getting bad grades. And but look, like the police came to this house, they said multiple times throughout the day, almost every day. They would come in the middle of the night and then they'd barge into the house. This is insanity, right? Bad grades. And then the crimes of the brother will be passed on to you. We got your brother's on the list, your sister's on the list. Now you're all on the list.
This is actually far worse than what we've experienced in our already terrible justice system. This isn't justice. This is the kind of stuff that you would expect in some sort of authoritarian government, dictatorial regime. And it just happened, and it's not even like a top news story.
Yeah, no, guys, it's begun. So like those science fiction movies where they look for proclivities in your DNA and your background, etc. It's literally begun. This is an NBC News report on it, and this is the Florida example is one, but again, it's a police manual that's being spread all across the country.
Right now, someone somewhere could be giving you a score. A number that estimates how likely you are to break the law, which tells police if they should zero in on you, and which could forever change your life and the lives of those around you.
It destroyed everything.
And this someone might not be a human being, but a computer.
So how do machines try to predict crime? And is it okay to do that?
No, it's not okay, but they're still doing it anyway. And that's just with the information they collect on us, with these huge databases they have on us from all aspects of life, like our financial transactions, social media posts and interactions, education, medical records, employment or incarceration status, our likes, our dislikes, political or religious affiliation, as well as all of our habits and lifestyles, and all being constantly monitored on anything computer related, as well as the whole giant CCTV camera systems around the whole world spying on us like rats in the cage wherever we go. Now, add to that a precise microchipping of people in the hand or the forehead that will give up not only your precise location, but listen, access to your very thoughts, and as they admitted, with a computer or artificial intelligence or AI constantly monitoring all, and it will even be able to predict what we will do in the future, and then they will deal with this accordingly. So hello, what's that sound like? It's exactly the Minority Report. It's being built right before our very eyes by Klaus and the gang. Once again, folks, all Hollywood has done is prepared us for it, who, by the way, also works for Klaus. Okay. In fact, speaking of preparation, Klaus Schwab even then goes on to share his passion where these brain chips could lead to, and how this new trending business model would involve someone, quote, trading access to his or her thoughts for the time-saving option of typing a social media post by thought alone. Talk about a whole new version of laziness. Are you kidding me? In fact, it continues on, watch, quote, the further one progresses into the world depicted in Schwab's books, the less of a laughing matter it all seems. The truth is that this highly influential figure at the center of the new global order currently being established is an out-and-out transhumanist who dreams of an end to natural human life, healthy life, and community. And believe it or not, Klaus Schwab actually repeats this message time and time again, as if to be sure we are duly warned by saying, quote, the mind-boggling innovations triggered by the fourth industrial revolution, from biotechnology to AI, are redefining what it means to be human. The future will challenge our understanding of what it means to be human from both a biological and a social standpoint. Already, advances in neurotechnologies and biotechnologies are forcing us to question, watch what he says, what it means to be human. And then he even spells it out in even more detail in the book called Shaping the Future of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, where he states, and I quote, the fourth industrial revolution technologies will not stop at becoming part of the physical world around us. Watch this, they will become a part of us. Indeed, some of us already feel that our smartphones have become an extension of ourselves. Today's external devices, from wearable computers to virtual reality headsets, will almost certainly become implantable in our bodies and brains. Exoskeletons and prosthetics will increase our physical power, while advances in neurotechnology enhance our cognitive abilities. We will become better able to manipulate our own genes and those of our children, he says. These developments, he says, raise profound questions like, where do we draw the line between human and machine? And what does it mean to be human? In fact, a whole section of his book is devoted to this theme, altering the human being, and he drools over this, the ability of new technologies to literally become part of us. And he invokes a cyborg future involving mixing digital and analog life that will redefine our very natures. These technologies will operate within our own biology and change how we interface with the world. They are capable of crossing the boundaries of body and mind, enhancing our physical abilities and even having a lasting impact on life itself. Then Schwab dreams of a, quote, active implantable microchips that break the skin barrier of our bodies, smart tattoos, biological computing, and custom designed organisms. And he's delighted to report that, quote, from Klaus, sensors, memory switches, and circuits can be encoded in common human gut bacteria, and that smart dust, full of computers with antennas, each much smaller than a grain of sand, can now organize themselves inside the body, and that implanted devices will likely also help communicate thoughts normally expressed verbally through a built-in smartphone, and potentially unexpressed thoughts or moods by reading brainwaves and other signals. And then he adds something called, listen, synthetic biology to the horizon of his fourth industrial revolution world, which will give the technocratic capitalist rulers of the world, quote, the ability to, listen, customize organisms by writing DNA and neurotechnologies in which humans will have fully artificial memories implanted in the brain. Did you catch that? This vision of the future, goes on to say, is enough to make some of us feel sick. Ethical objections, anyone? Yeah, the understatement of the year. But it gets even worse. Klaus Schwab happily announces this, the day is coming, watch this, when cows are engineered to produce in its milk a blood clotting element, which hemophiliacs lack, and pigs will grow organs suitable for human transplantation. This genetic mixing of humans and animals in the very near future is disturbing when one considers that the sinister eugenics program of Nazi Germany, into which Schwab was born into, used to be considered evil and deemed beyond the pale of human society. But now, Schwab evidently feels that eugenics is due a revival, announcing with regard to genetic editing, quote from Schwab, that is now far easier to manipulate with precision the human genome within viable embryos so that we can have designer babies in the future who possess particular traits and who are resistant to a specific disease. And we're even, folks, warned by these sick global elites that, quote, those who remain as humans are likely to become a subspecies. They will effectively be the chimpanzees of the future. Or as Klaus Schwab puts it in his book, The Fourth Industrial Revolution, we are at the threshold of a radical systematic change that requires human beings to adapt continuously. As a result, we may witness an increasingly degree of polarization in the world, marked by those who embrace change versus those who resist it. This ontological inequality will separate those who adapt from those who resist, the material winners and losers in all senses of the words. The winners may even benefit from some form of radical human improvement generated by certain segments of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, such as genetic engineering, from which the losers will be deprived. The risks creating class conflicts and other clashes unlike anything we've ever seen before. Schwab is already talking to folks about this great transformation, again, back in 2016, and is clearly determined to do everything in his power to bring about his eugenics-inspired transhumanist world of artificial intelligence, surveillance, control, and exponential profit, and it's outlined in his annual World Economic Forum meetings in Davos, Switzerland. Now, and to pull it all off, quote, Schwab has become one of the most well-connected men on earth. And he uses, as the driving force behind this dystopian vision, the World Economic Forum, where Schwab has courted the heads of state, leading business executives, and the elite of the academic and scientific circles in Davos Fold for over 50 years. And he is the front man of this Great Reset, a sweeping effort to remake civilization globally for the express benefit of the global elite, the World Economic Forum, and their allies. And so the question again is, how in the world did this guy pull it off? How did Klaus Schwab, German-born, Nazi-influenced guy, get so many global leaders and elites and governments around the world to join him in creating this sick, evil, twisted, satanic, Hitler-revived dystopian vision, this new world order, the Fourth Reich, which he tries to pacify by calling the Fourth Industrial Revolution, also known as the Great Reset? How did he do it? Well, let's break it down. The first way he did it was by controlling world leaders. Believe it or not, folks, many years ago, Klaus Schwab knew, obviously, he couldn't pull this sick, twisted, satanic, dystopian nightmare off for all of our futures by himself. No way, not even close. So, this is why he also created a group years ago, basically a global recruitment camp within the World Economic Forum. It's called the Young Global Leaders Program. And there he groomed these future worker bees to aid him in implementing his evil, wicked, dystopian global agenda upon the whole planet. But of course, you're not supposed to know or see that, okay? So they pitched themselves as some sort of altruistic group of goody two-shoes who are only here to help us and lead us into a time of modern utopia, as you can see falsely being promoted here.
We recognize that the world is changing at an incredible pace. What the World Economic Forum does is bring together leaders from all different backgrounds, from all different walks of life. And that provides a unique space for new ideas and new solutions to flourish.
Is really a very unique place. It's a place where industry comes together to work with government, to work with NGOs, academics, to truly make a difference in the world.
Leaders come together because of their own personal commitment to one another, to see follow-up to the discussions that they had at our meetings.
I'm generally really skeptical about panels and debates and presentations and whatnot, but I've actually been shocked to discover in the last year that it makes a huge difference.
The present challenges in a complex, interconnected, fast-moving world cannot be met by one stakeholder group alone. It needs collaborative efforts.
Magic moments happen all the time at the World Economic Forum, where the right kind of constituent unexpectedly will come together with somebody else who's looking for exactly that expertise.
Not only do the multi-stakeholder groups that we bring together talk, they also make changes.
A lot of the answers reside with practitioners, civil society voices, social entrepreneurs, young people, and others who are on the ground working with these populations at the front lines and finding solutions.
It challenges all your assumptions about your existing worldview, regardless of which part of the world you're from and how much experience you have.
Nowhere in the world is there another forum which brings together governments, NGOs, corporate leaders, activists, artists, musicians, to all come together and talk about the biggest issues facing the world.
See? It's just a group of elites from all walks of life working with Klaus Schwab to talk about the issues of the world for our own benefit. Really? Or is it global elites from governments, businesses, Hollywood, entertainment, media, politicians, billionaires, tech moguls around the whole world helping Klaus Schwab to take over the world? I think the answer is obvious, as you'll clearly see as we continue to progress in this documentary. But this is how they pitch themselves, folks, as they literally meet on an annual basis to take over the planet, remove our individual sovereignty and freedom, and replace it with the elite being served by the rest of us, who they allow to serve them as worker bees for their new world order, the Great Reset, the Fourth Industrial Revolution, whatever you want to call it. Same thing. And they got it set up so that you and I, the average Joe, will never be able to join them in their meetings as elites. For instance, quote, Schwab keeps the annual World Economic Forum meetings exclusive by limiting the forum's membership to 1,000 of the world's biggest corporations, which pay $39,000 a year for the privilege. Admission to the annual meeting is an additional $20,000, but those who work for the governments, nonprofits, and media outlets, they get to go for free. Schwab also bans those who would have been indicted or whose companies are bankrupt. And if you're retired, you can't go either, no matter who you used to be. Schwab is also a master scheduler who has to juggle the lineups to accommodate egos like Bill Clinton. He won't go unless he gets a primo speaking slot. Or to accommodate accidents like Arnold Schwarzenegger, who canceled an event in 2007 after he broke his leg in a skiing accident. And no one really knows who will succeed Schwab. A survivor of prostate cancer, he had hoped that a gentleman named Jose Maria Figueres, one of the forum's chief executives and a former president of Costa Rica, would take over. But that idea was abandoned, though, after Figueres had resigned and had to resign upon failing to disclose $900,000 in consulting fees. So again, basically, unless you got big bucks or big connections, you and I, the average Joe, we are never going to step foot in these meetings that they gather annually to what? To discuss and plan out how best to take over the planet, because we're not elites like them. Now, unfortunately, people are starting to catch on, and that's not unfortunately, that's a good news, but they're starting to catch on to the real motives of Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum and these global elites, as this investigator shares. Quote, "If you think that the COVID-19 outbreak was an accident, you better think again. This has been in the works for decades, just waiting for the right reason to initiate it. The great minds of the world's elites who believe they are smarter than the peons that work for them and they have the right to rule everything you do, have decided it is time for the serfs, you and I, to give up what freedoms we now have and just do what we're told. The World Economic Forum has taken the role of overseer of the world, believing that they need to be the ones who decide what you do, when you do it, how you do it, and even think that you should be allowed to do it. They also believe that because of their high intelligence and wisdom, that they will be able to avoid world disasters and even pandemics. Yeah, they're the ones planning them. But anyway, it goes on and says, I think we've heard this same rhetoric garbage about the United Nations. They would do the same thing. They would stop all wars and control rogue nations. Well, how'd that work out for us? Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, and most Arab countries continually attack Israel, but Israel is the one that UN sanctions. The Russia-Ukraine war, nothing to see here, move along. The World Economic Forum is just another global attempt to control the globe by the global elite. Prove me wrong, they say. The World Economic Forum was initiated in 1971 by Klaus Schwab with the goal of raising up world leaders to look at only the globalist point of view and seeing the average citizen, watch this, as useless eaters. Another important piece of information through the World Economic Forum initiated by Klaus Schwab in 1971, Mr. Global has been training his own puppets since 1992. And he's been doing that through the Young Global Leaders Program. People like Angela Merkel and Bill Gates were among the first to graduate in the class of 1992, and even a large number of current leaders, politicians, predominantly weak personalities with the most well-trained rhetoric skills also come from this program, including people like Justin Trudeau in Canada. And we can see what these so-called leaders are striving for, the New World Order. The World Economic Forum firmly believes that there are too many people on the planet. And isn't it funny that God didn't see that happening? They know better? Yeah. These arrogant fools think that they have the answer to the made-up problem. Liberals always seem to invent a problem and then try to convince you that they have the answer to solve the problem. Can you say climate change? Dr. Rainer Fulmig, he's been exposing the real agenda of the World Economic Forum for a while, and he believes that it must be stopped as quickly as possible, which is another reason why we're doing this documentary. He says their goal is to hold those who are responsible for this pandemic accountable under both civil and criminal law. So again, not everybody's rolled over and played dead. People are fighting back. The Berlin Corona Committee already now has extremely incriminating evidence proving that this corona plandemic never had anything to do with health. Rather, Mr. Global, Klaus Schwab's actions are aimed solely at these goals, the destruction of regional economies to make the population dependent on Mr. Global's global supply chains, shifting the wealth of the world's population from the bottom to the top, to the super rich, to Mr. Global's population reduction. No matter what word was being used to describe the pandemic and the fallout from the government overreach, Dr. Fulmick concluded, quote, "You can call it genocide as well as Mr. Global gaining total control over the remaining population and the installation of a world government under the UN, which is now in the control of the World Economic Forum. We are dealing with, listen, megalomaniac psychopaths and sociopaths who must be stopped and in fact should have been stopped a very long time ago." The World Economic Forum doesn't stand on the mountaintop to shout their intentions, but they aren't silent about it either. One of their major funders, watch this, of the World Economic Forum, wait for it, is George Soros. Anything Soros is involved in is not good for America or the American people. And when it comes to those who have endorsed the World Economic Forum that are in our government, it's a list of who's who from both sides of the aisle. Watch this. Bill Keating, congressman from Massachusetts, a Democrat. Daniel Musser, congressman from Pennsylvania, a Republican. Madeline Dean, congressman from Pennsylvania, a Democrat. Ted Lieu, congressman from California, a Democrat. Ann Wagner, congressman from Missouri, Republican. Christopher A. Coons, senator from Delaware, a Democrat. Darrell Issa, congressman from California, Republican. Dean Phillips, congressman from Minnesota, a Democrat. Deborah Fisher, senator from Nebraska, a Republican. Eric Holcomb, governor of Indiana, a Republican. Gregory W. Meeks, congressman from New York, a Democrat. John W. Hickenlooper, senator from Colorado, a Democrat. Larry Hogan, governor of Maryland, Republican. Michael McCall, congressman from Texas, a Republican. Pat Toomey, senator from Pennsylvania, a Republican. Patrick J. Leahy, senator from Vermont, a Democrat. Robert Mendez, senator from New Jersey, a Democrat. And a shocker, former Vice President Al Gore of the United States, a Democrat, just to name a few. And so as you can see, the traitors of the American way of life are from, listen, both political parties. And I think you can see now as to why the World Economic Forum believes this is the time to institute the Great Reset. They say the world population has showed its willingness to be shoved into a box and do as we are told. That's what we saw with the COVID pandemic, the great experiment. Americans aren't quite ready, though, for this. Some are, but we still have our God-given desire to be free, and we still have guns at our disposal to make sure that it stays that way, as one person shares. And for those that have read the book 1984, you will recognize many of its features in the UN and World Economic Forum's Agenda 2030. The World Economic Forum Agenda 2030 is a dystopian nightmare that's chock full of evil agendas such as population control, eradicating livestock, except for the elites, and replacing it with synthetic meat, forcing the masses to consume insects and live in pods. You know, you'll own nothing to be happy. A digital takeover of everything to achieve total surveillance control and consolidating power within a multinationalist globalist body that supersedes all other governments. Essentially, they say and conclude, once all institutions are, quote, razed to the ground, it will be the all-out technocratic reign of the elitists. Any American politician, listen, that supports this organization can only be classified as a traitor. The World Economic Forum is an organization that we must stop, and we must stop it now. And again, I would wholeheartedly agree, which is another reason why we're doing this documentary. But so much so for being a simple, kind-hearted group of altruistic goody two-shoes only here to help us for our highest good. Yeah, right, what a joke. Yet this is what Klaus Schwab, the World Economic Forum, and all his young global leaders are all about. He groomed and planted all these young global leaders around the world, and they do the bidding of Klaus. And the gang is advancing his sick, twisted, evil globalist agenda, as you can see here.